Hi, Ed here. Welcome to another edition of Ed Talks. We have no commercials, no advertisements, no sponsors, just pure content. And I'm thankful for many, many great listeners. So I know you have a lot of choices in what you can watch and listen. Thank you for being with me. And what makes Ed Talks so special is our guests like Ankit. Ankit, welcome to Ed Talks.
Thanks for having me today, Ed.
Now, this is super exciting because we're going to talk about conversational AI. I know Infinitis, your company, is a leader in that space. And I don't want to jump too far ahead. You've been in the AI space a long time. You know, people are just talking about it now, but it's been around for a while, and you've been a leader in it. And so we're definitely going to dig deep there. But we first met Ankit now in terms of in with eyeball to eyeball, but we're both in the industry. We were brought together by a mutual friend. And when I knew you were the leader of this company, I always wanted to have you on. So thrilled to have you. And then one thing I wanted to know, Ankit, and it doesn't have to be tech or healthcare, but what is one of the best customer experiences you've had in this past year?
You know, um, I'll actually tell you an interesting story about one of our customers. Until about 4 weeks ago, they weren't, 6 weeks ago, they weren't a customer. And they called us. And January is a busy time for a lot of people in healthcare because everyone's insurance is changing. And so the amount of work quadruples because
Yeah.
every provider's office wants to figure out if patients still have coverage. Every insurance company has to hire seasonal staff to answer all those questions. And we got a call second week of January from someone we'd been talking to for a while, and they said, hey, our January re-verification system this season is just not going well. Are you able to take us on? And normally for a new customer, we go through contracting, which in healthcare we know can take a while because there's all kinds of compliance security requirements. And then the implementation for our services is somewhere between 2 and 6 weeks, depending on the complexity of what's needed. And they said, but we need you to go live in 4 days. And I said, well, and it was long weekend. It was MLK weekend. It were 3 of those days. And we said, we'll move fast. We're a startup. Can we get contracting done? Can we get through information security? Can we get the SOW in place? And can we do implementation? We didn't do it in 4 days, but 6 days later, we were live. And there were 10,000 other patients that in a week and a half, we were able to verify benefits for. As they look back on it, talk to us about it, as we talk internally about it, that idea of making sure you can get patients on therapy on time, keep them on therapy, and being customer obsessed. It was, I've experienced a lot of great things in my career, but just seeing both teams coming together and just getting
Yeah.
something done quickly gives me hope that everyone in healthcare, when they really want to make something happen, they make it happen.
Yeah, no, that's a good example. And you're right. May that be a model for others in terms of the speed in which we move. Ankit, tell me about a thing that your parents sort of forced you to do growing up that when they told you to do it, you kind of rolled your eyeballs, at least inside your mind you did. But now that you're an adult, you're happy that you did it.
So twice a week, starting when I was about 4.5 or 5 years old, I don't know the exact time, my parents took me to learn Indian classical singing.
Mm.
Uh, and as a 5-year-old who was being told to get up at 6:30 or 7 a.m., normally, I remember it was Thursdays and Sundays. The Sunday one was the one I really didn't like. But going every single time, the thing they did that was really great was they made it with another friend of mine. So it was two of us in a class. So both of us had the entire duration of our commute to complain to each other about how we were sleepy and then be in the class. And while one was singing, the other used to act like they're laying down and taking a nap. And then the teacher used to say, now it's your turn. Looking back at it, I kind of laugh about it, but the discipline it instilled in doing something repeatedly and just becoming good at it, and then realizing once you're good at something, my belief is once you're good at something, you end up enjoying it. And so music is something that stayed with me through my life. And now with two little kids, it's something that I'm trying to instill in them.
So what kind of things do you do still today musically?
A few things, so actually growing up, once I moved to the US, I picked up the saxophone. So I played sax for about 20 years. In college was when I came back to singing, and I was part of the a cappella group at UC Berkeley, an Indian music a cappella group. And now it's more fun with the kids and introducing them to different kinds of music
Yeah.
and singing and playing instruments with them.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. And I would love to hear the quartet. That sounds really, really cool. So I know you have an interesting story, Ankit. Why don't you tell us a little bit about it, both personally and professionally, all the way up to where we are today?
Yeah, so as I implied, I grew up in India, moved here in 1997 when my parents decided it was time for my dad to get into the tech ecosystem. He was, he's a technologist at heart, and found in the 90s being in India, if you got senior, you were managing people. He's an incredible manager. I've seen that firsthand, but he didn't want 90% of his day to be approving people's vacation plans and being in meetings. He wanted to build, and he thought that coming to Silicon Valley was how he was going to accomplish that. So we came here. He joined a startup. He got to enjoy the dot-com boom and then the bust, and then did a couple of his own startups in the network security space. So growing up, that was a big influence on my life as an entrepreneur. The stable breadwinner in the family, though, was my mom. And she came here, changed her career. She was a negotiator on behalf of the government of India, buying and selling ships when we were there. And an interesting kind of side story, when you have to buy these ships for hundreds of millions of dollars, she used to go to the Middle East and raise capital for the government. And let's just say Middle Eastern money givers weren't used to meeting women in meetings and negotiating with them. And so the stories she shared with us as I grew up were just absolutely fascinating. But she came here, and the government of the US wasn't going to take a new immigrant as their negotiator. So she said, I'm going to go to community college, learn accounting, and join PricewaterhouseCoopers. And she built her career in accounting over the last 27 years, just retired a year ago. But to me, seeing the family dynamic of my mom being the stable breadwinner, my dad being that dreamy entrepreneur, is very personal today, because in some ways my wife provides a lot of stability to our family, while I go off and I say I want to spend the next so many years building a company. I went to Cal. I studied CS and business, undergrad and grad school. Joined a search engine startup, and I didn't realize that the research I was doing at Berkeley, which in the late 2000s, we were taking sparse matrix vector multiplication on multi-core chips, including GPUs, in our lab, was going to become the basis of a lot of what's happening today with deep learning, machine learning, and the kind of AI boom. And so, the story of AI in my career started before I even knew that's what I was getting involved in. And then I went to a little startup, and it was a startup building a search engine to try and compete with Google. We failed at our mission of becoming the biggest startup in the biggest search engine in the world, but we did explore a few very interesting ideas, which I think are very pertinent today. The first idea was that if you go back 25 years, search has always been about you search for something and you get 10 blue links. And we said, that's not how it needs to be. What if you could get an answer up top? And so one of the pieces of IP we had that eventually got acquired by Google and now is on almost every Google search page is the idea of a one box that could answer a question if you can get it. Because I remember searching for Queen Elizabeth, and the first 4 links were just different biographies about Queen Elizabeth. And it was like, why are you giving me 4 of the same? Just distill that and give me the 5 things that matter in a single box.
Yeah.
We now take that for granted. The second thing, and the CEO of that company had an interesting idea in 2009, and he said the most useful pages on the web are Wikipedia pages, because if I go on a Wikipedia page, it's well organized and everything I want to know about that topic is there. What if you could build a search engine where, regardless of what you searched for, it created a Wikipedia page on demand for that topic? And he tried building it, and the startup was called Cool, and he called it Cpedia. When it worked, it was brilliant. When it didn't work, it was complete garbage, and the media tore it apart. But if you think about what ChatGPT or Bard are today, you give it something and it's able to distill information
Yeah.
and show it exactly in an organized fashion. And so in many ways, the ideas of that startup are now coming to be. And so sometimes, technology and timelines play a very interesting role. So, fast forward to today, I've done a couple of startups of my own. I helped start Google's AI venture fund, scaled it up. It's now doing incredibly well, called Gradient Ventures. But through and through, the idea has been different parts of AI. And now we're automating back office operations in healthcare at Infinitis, specifically phone calls using conversational AI.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Your career is very vast, and like I said at the top, you've been doing AI for a long time. It's not something new, as the media sometimes seems to make it out to be. So I know you've had a lot of varied roles, but if I had to nail you down to one role that you've had that has best prepared you for being the lead of your company today.
Yeah. So I'll go back to that startup Cool that I was talking about. When Cool was towards the end of its journey and it was being acquired by Google, for some reason, the Google Corp dev team asked us to digitize all the documents we had as a company, our incorporation documents, our funding documents, employment. This was 2008, and they said, hey, we have a digital data room, so everything needs to be uploaded. There's 10,000 pages of documents, and one of the founders, the wife of the CEO, the president, Anna, she said, Ankit, would you mind scanning these and organizing them into PDFs? Now, a software engineer normally would be like, that's not my job. I was like, I would love to do that. I don't think she realizes this to this day, that opportunity to scan those 10,000 pages and organize them taught me two things. One, at a startup, no job is too big or too small. And sometimes the jobs you don't expect to be the most informative or educative teach you the most. I got to look at every document, every employment agreement, every funding agreement, every contract we had with a customer or advertiser at that company. And I learned so much. I learned that I should have asked for a signing bonus when I got a job, or I should have asked for a relocation bonus because others that moved 10 minutes got a relocation bonus. I was like, what is this? But when I think about building a company, every company has its own stories, but there are some basic things that you don't learn in business school that you just learn while you're on the job. And those 10,000 pages taught me a lot about how that company was built, so that when I came across it in my two companies, I at least know what questions to ask or where to go.
Yeah. Before we leave this topic sort of a career, if you were to talk to a new grad and they had an interest in sort of the startup space, trying something new, what's one piece of advice that you would give them?
Yeah, I mean, I would say go to a company with very smart people who will allow you to be around them and do things that you don't know how to do. Don't be afraid of jobs that are not in your job description, because
Yeah.
that's what makes startups special.
Yeah, that's good. Well, I want to do a deeper dive into Infinitis, but before we get there, one thing even more important, and we're recording this around the time of Rare Disease Day. So there are many rare diseases, and it's important that we acknowledge those. And I know it's something special to you. Can you tell us a little bit about your daughter, Reina?
Yeah, so Reina is almost 3 years old. When she was born, she had a very, her sugars fell dramatically into the teens, and no one knew what was going on. And then we diagnosed it as something called congenital hyperinsulinism. It's kind of the opposite of diabetes, where your pancreas generate too much insulin, and so your sugars drop. And in her case, it's a very rare disease across the world. And in the US, there's a couple of centers of excellence, one at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, one at Cook's Children in Texas. We took her to CHOP, and fortunately, she had the kind of hyperinsulinism that is curable. So she had what's called a pancreatectomy, where they chopped off about 21% of her pancreas and cured her. But many others live with it for their whole life. But through that journey and what that has meant for our family, for her, for the whole community that we've gotten to know, Rare Disease Day, which is observed on the last day of February. So February 28th most years, but February 29th in leap years like this one is a day just to raise awareness for the 10,000 or more rare diseases, many of which don't have cures or don't have communities, just so that we can help invest in science and in treatments for everybody involved.
Well, I'm glad that Reina is doing well and is cured, and our hearts obviously go way out to others who are still dealing with rare diseases. How has this influenced the journey with Reina? Did it? How did it influence, if it did, your journey as a leader and what you're doing today specifically?
You know, when I started Infinitis with my friend Sham, we saw it as a hard technical problem to solve in an area with a giant business. And we both of those are very true, but Reina was born a couple of years after we started the company. And for me, it made a lot of that journey much more real. Whenever someone new joins Infinitis, I tell them there's 3 journeys that every single patient goes through. The journey number 1 is the diagnosis journey, when the doctor tells you that you or a loved one has a condition and what that means for you, because you have to accept it. You have to change what your dreams for life may be. When we were told that Reina has hyperinsulinism, we Googled it, and a number of the pictures were kids with tubes in their stomach because they were being given dextrose for the rest of their life, or different medications and hormones for the rest of their life. And so my wife and I said, does this mean we can never go on vacations? Does this mean Reina won't be able to do sports? It changes how you think about the life ahead of you. The second journey you go through is the industrial complex of healthcare. We were at UCSF, an incredible institution with incredible doctors, but they didn't see this rare disease. The last case was a year and a half before us. So we had to figure out how we get a second opinion, how we go over to Children's Hospital of Philadelphia after figuring out that was the right place. All the prior authorizations needed. She went on an air ambulance. I didn't know what that was. Turns out it's a private jet for patients that need an ambulance in the air. And then the third journey is the financial journey, that explanation of benefits that comes in the mail and then what your out of pocket is. Reina's bills were in the millions through everything she went through. We were thankful that we had health insurance that covered most of it. But the thing I tell my team and all of us really empathize with, because of one, healthcare is personal to everybody. Everybody goes through their own journeys. But 2, if we can automate some of those back office administrative tasks, it unlocks those people that joined healthcare to serve patients to be there in that time of need. 1, to listen to them, and 2, to tell them the things that we were told. 1, there's a Facebook group of parents that have gone through this. These are 3 specific families who have agreed to chat with you about their journey, so you know what to look forward to. There's a family out of Fresno, California, that told us which apartment building in Philadelphia they stayed in while their daughter was at CHOP. We stayed in the same one. The day we got there, they had sent a box of Legos for our son, because they're like, we're sure you're thinking about your daughter. We don't want your son to feel like no one's caring about him. Just little things like that. That's what makes healthcare human-like. And I think that's the biggest takeaway I've had from that journey.
Yeah, no, that's good. I love it. I hate that it has to happen to people, but I'm glad that it was very informative to you and the company and the culture and what you're trying to build. So tell us a little bit more about Infinitis. We talked about your career and your journey, and again, you know, special discussion around your daughter and Rare Disease Day. Tell us a little bit about your company.
So Infinitis, we started about 5 years ago to solve what may seem like a very simple problem, which is so much data in healthcare exchanges hands over phone calls. So if a doctor's office needs to figure out whether a medication, especially specialty medication, is covered or not, someone in that office is picking up a phone, calling the insurance company to check whether a prior auth is needed, who's going to pay how much, whether a step therapy is needed. The questions can go deeper and deeper. If it's a patient access program, is there an accumulator or maximizer that is being put on the plan? Similarly, a specialty pharmacy is calling copay assistance programs to figure out how much is left on the card, how much can be applied to help that patient who needs financial assistance. Or a weight loss program is calling a pharmacy to figure out, do you still have some Mounjaro or Wegovy so that I can send my patient who is enrolled in my program to you? all of this data, in my mind, should be connected digitally.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's humans talking to humans as the connective tissue. So we've built a machine that can automate these very transactional back office phone calls that happen millions of times a day in healthcare. And we're automating them call after call. We've done just over 3 million calls so far in our lifetime.
Wow, that's amazing. Can you give us some results of maybe one or two organizations, like as after they implemented, what were the results that they saw?
Yeah. So I'll give a couple of examples. Syncora, previously known as AmerisourceBergen, powers a lot of patient assistance programs around the country. They've talked about how implementing our digital assistant, Eva, to make these phone calls has increased the data quality by 10%. Of course, the turnaround times are faster, the cost is lower. So all of those benefits are there. But the key one for me is that we're able to improve data quality by 10%. On the flip side, the people in those calls that we're calling are the payers, and a large national payer started receiving these tens of thousands of calls from us and said, well, why the heck are my humans talking to your machines? And we said, that doesn't have to be that way. Can you give us data digitally? And we'll get rid of the phone call. They said, well, we don't have all the data digitally, but we have some of it digitally. So we did a few things. One, with that payer, they have a dedicated team that just takes phone calls from our machines calling in. So those people know exactly what to expect. That reduced the time of the call pretty dramatically because our machines don't chit chat. They just say, these are the things we need. Let's get the data and move on. Two, we got part of the data digitally, which reduced the time that they spend on calls. And three, we gave them a roadmap of the kinds of data that we would like, which means others would like as well. And we're working collaboratively with them in order to digitize this whole process. They've already realized a 30 to 35% savings on a per call basis, and that number just keeps going up as more data digitizes. And we're doing that with many payers. So the reason I shared these two examples, one's on behalf of the person calling and one's on behalf
Yeah.
of the one receiving. That's important to us. We want to be that connective tissue across the ecosystem.
Yeah, no, those are great examples because it really showcases the promise of AI and what these sort of technologies can do to improve quality, but also, the whole experience and as well as revenues. So one thing, Ankit, I always love whenever we have guests is to talk about leadership, because that's one thing that transcends whether we're talking about someone who's a CEO, founder, or a clinician, but everything boils down at the end of the day to leadership. So what's one or two things that you've learned from mentors along the way? Because certainly I know you've had mentors that have helped you. What are one or two key things that they've taught you?
I'll throw out two. I've been thankful and lucky to have many incredible mentors. But about 15 years ago, actually my first week at Google, I met a VP for lunch. I used to reach out to random VPs and say, would you like to grab lunch? And funnily enough, most of them said yes, because everyone was too scared to reach out to them. So their email boxes weren't as busy as you would expect. And I got lunch with one gentleman. His name is Jim Colatouros, and I hope he doesn't mind me sharing this piece of advice he gave me then. He told me, Ankit, you seem like someone who runs really fast, and you want to get everything done and you're impatient. But just remember, it takes 1 year to get 1 year's experience. And it's a quote that I've kept with me because it's something that as I got into healthcare, I knew nothing about healthcare 5 years ago. And as I'm spending more time, I'm understanding how the different pieces come together. My team learns the same way. There's some things we can accelerate and reduce the time it takes to happen, but other places where we realize it takes 1 year to get 1 year's experience. And the second one is that in some way, shape, or form, it all comes down to the people. And I think it's today's Employee Appreciation Day, and one of the things that I think a lot about is how lucky we are for every person who's joined our journey at Infinitis. But really, every great company is great because of its people. If you have the right people in the right places, they will have the best ideas, they will push back, they will think forward, and magic happens. So I think those are the two that I think most about.
Yeah, those are great. And you did drop a third one on there in your own example, and I just want to reinforce it, is just reaching out inside of your own company. The likelihood of someone within your company rejecting you is very slim. And as you said, hardly anyone does it, so they're open to it. And what a great way to learn from other leaders and at the same time learn about your company. And those people probably became your advocates, as you were growing within the company because you had a relationship with them. And so and then you gain your own knowledge of the organization. I love that. So that's why I wanted to reinforce that. Where do you go for inspiration? So, sometimes we get stuck on the mundane, although with the startup and just your personality, sort of fast paced and always very observant. But is there a specific thing that you might do where you search for inspiration or find it?
The place I tend to find inspiration often is my wife, my parents, and my kids. It's because they're constantly pushing me to slow down, and I, I I realize a lot of things in the shower or when I'm just not thinking about the things that I'm focused on. It's when you step away and when you look at the world from a different light. And so it's really family where I go to for inspiration for most things.
Yeah, that's good. Ankit, we covered a lot in a short amount of time. Is there something you want to double down on or something that we forgot to talk about?
You know, healthcare was absolutely new to me as an ecosystem when I joined it. And there's so many people in Silicon Valley and beyond that want to improve healthcare. We all have our grudges with different parts of healthcare. The thing that I've realized in the last 5 years is everybody in healthcare wants to make it better.
Yeah.
They're desperate for others to join the fight to make it better. And unlike many other industries I've been a part of, the amount of collaboration and openness to new ideas and technology has been incredible. And I think the pandemic really sped that up, and I don't think there's any slowing down. And so if there's anybody who's listening to this that wants to get into healthcare, now is the time. It's an incredible time to be a technologist working in healthcare.
Yeah, that's very well said. Yeah, there's no place like healthcare, no doubt about that. Ankit, this has been super, super informative. I appreciate you sharing, everything from your personal life and how you grew up in music, and then with your daughter and her special circumstances, and just some insights into what it's like, growing up in the valley, if you will, and becoming an entrepreneur. So thank you for being part of EDTalks.
Thanks so much.
Hey, that wraps up another edition of EDTalks. Thanks for listening.